It was a Tuesday afternoon when Maria, a woman who had known what it meant to struggle but had always managed to keep going, found herself standing at the counter of a small rundown diner. The rain had been relentless that day, a constant beat against the windows, and the diner was half empty. She hadn't planned on stopping here, but something had drawn her in, like an invisible thread tugging her through the door. She needed something warm. She needed a moment to gather her thoughts, to breathe. Behind the counter, the man looked exhausted. His shirt was slightly disheveled, the cuffs rolled up as if they had been forgotten in his rush. His eyes were tired, deep-set with dark bags beneath them that spoke of sleepless nights. He had a look about him that made her think he was more than just a diner owner. He was a man at the end of his rope. Maria hesitated for a moment before she ordered. She was used to making quick decisions, but something about this place, about this man, made her feel like she needed to do something. She caught the man's gaze as he turned to prepare her coffee, and for a moment their eyes locked, just for a beat longer than necessary. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a wave of empathy rush through her. She sat at a corner booth, her coffee warming her hands as she watched him work. She had been there for about 15 minutes when she noticed something. A small pile of unpaid bills stacked in a corner, slightly covered by a napkin. She couldn't help but feel a pang in her chest. It was hard to ignore the obvious signs of struggle. People didn't let bills pile up unless they were worried, unless things weren't going well. "Excuse me," she called to him after a while, her voice soft but clear. He looked up from the counter, his expression weary, but he smiled politely. "Yeah, what can I get you?" Maria took a deep breath, trying to decide how to word what she was about to say. She wasn't one to intrude, but something about this man's exhaustion, his quiet resilience, struck a chord in her. She could tell he was hanging on by a thread, just like she had been not too long ago. "I'd like to pay for my meal, but also, I'd like to pay for whatever's left on your tab," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm not sure how much it is, but I just want to help." The man froze for a moment, staring at her as though she had said something completely unexpected. His eyes were wide, searching hers for some hint of insincerity, some reason behind her words. But there was none. Maria wasn't looking for anything in return. She had learned, after years of having just enough, that sometimes giving to others felt like the only way to truly give to yourself. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't know what you mean," he said, his voice tinged with confusion. Maria smiled, sensing his unease. "I see your bills there. I don't want to pry, but I can tell you're going through something. I don't have much, but what I have I'd like to give. It won't fix everything, but maybe it'll help." For a long moment, the man just stood there, his hand on the counter as if frozen in place. Maria could see his internal struggle, the pride, the hesitation. She could tell he was about to refuse, about to say that he didn't need her charity. But then, slowly, he let out a long breath and walked over to her table. "You really want to do this?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. "Why?" Maria glanced at the small stack of bills, the evidence of his stress, and then back up at him. "Because I've been there. I've been in places where you think there's no way out, and someone offers you a hand, even when they don't know you. It's not about the money, it's about the help. So I'm offering what I can." He looked at her for a long time, his face unreadable. Then, as if the weight of the world had shifted just slightly, he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice quiet but tinged with gratitude. "Thank you." Maria paid for her meal, and as she stood up to leave, the man gave her a small, tired smile. "I don't know how to thank you. This is more than just a meal." Maria shrugged, her smile warm but humble. "It's just a little kindness. That's all." She stepped outside, the cool air greeting her as she walked into the rain once again. But this time it didn't feel quite so heavy. As she walked down the street toward her car, she thought about the man in the diner, the way his shoulders had sagged just a little less after she left. She knew she wouldn't change his life with a meal or some cash, but maybe, just maybe, she had given him a little hope. 3 weeks later, Maria was walking into the same diner. The rain had been constant that week, the streets slick with the promise of another storm. She hadn't planned on stopping, but something felt different today. Maybe it was the familiar hum of the city, or maybe it was the hope that she would see him again. As she walked in, the bell over the door rang, and she was immediately greeted by the same man from before. But this time his face was different. He wasn't as tired. The lines of worry seemed softened, and there was a new energy to his movements as he wiped down the counter. His eyes locked onto hers and a smile spread across his face. "Maria," he called out. "I didn't expect to see you again." She smiled back, feeling a warmth inside that had nothing to do with the rain. "I figured I'd come check in. I'm glad to see you're still here." I am, thanks to you, he said, his voice carrying a new weight. I can't explain what happened, but I've been getting a lot of customers lately. More than I expected. Maria's brow furrowed slightly. What do you mean? He leaned closer to the counter, his voice quieter now but full of gratitude. After you left, I got a call from a company that was interested in buying my place. They wanted to help me renovate and get back on my feet. They even offered me a loan to help with the bills. It's not everything, but it's something. I don't think I would have gotten that call without you. I really don't. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. A loan? Renovations? The small act of kindness she had extended had started a ripple effect that was changing his life in ways she never imagined. I don't know what to say, she said, a lump in her throat. He smiled again, but this time it was more confident, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. You don't need to say anything. You gave me a chance when I needed it the most. And now I'm doing what I can to pay it forward. That's what you taught me. Sometimes all it takes is one small gesture to turn things around. Maria felt a sense of warmth rush through her, a deep satisfaction that she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't about the money, the food, or the help. It was about the connection, the way one simple act had brought two strangers together and changed both their lives. I'm glad to hear that, Maria said, her voice soft but full of meaning. I'm really glad. As she turned to leave, the rain had stopped. The world felt a little bit lighter. The city seemed a little less daunting. And for the first time in a long time, Maria believed that kindness, just like the rain, had a way of nourishing what was broken even when you didn't see it coming. As she stepped outside, she knew that sometimes, all it took was one meal and one person who believed that a small gesture could change everything. The meal arrived not long after Maria placed her order. Simple but comforting. The steam rising from the bowl of soup felt like a small act of warmth in the otherwise dreary diner. As she sat at her table, the businessman, whose name she hadn't yet learned, continued to stir the cup of coffee in front of him, lost in his thoughts. His eyes flicked back and forth between the window and the stack of papers in front of him, but he wasn't really reading them. He wasn't really doing anything at all. Maria had seen that look before, the hollow, defeated stare that came from too many sleepless nights and too many missed opportunities. It was the kind of look that made her think of her own struggles when things had seemed impossible. She could relate to that weight, that sense of being trapped in a cycle that you couldn't break out of no matter how hard you tried. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her chest. She could have just paid for her meal and gone on with her day, never thinking about the businessman again. But she couldn't shake the feeling that he was someone who could use a little help. Not just financially but emotionally. He seemed to need someone to believe in him again. As if on cue, their eyes met across the room. He was looking at her, a slight frown etched across his forehead, as if he were trying to figure her out. Maria wasn't sure why, but she felt compelled to act. She wasn't someone who usually intervened in other people's lives, but there was something about this moment, something about this man, that pulled her in. She stood up and walked over to his table, her footsteps soft against the floor. He looked up at her with a mixture of surprise and confusion. "Excuse me," Maria began, her voice steady but kind. "I couldn't help but notice that you seem troubled. If you don't mind me asking what's going on." The businessman blinked, clearly not used to being approached so directly. For a moment, he said nothing, as if weighing whether to open up to a complete stranger. But then, with a sigh, he set his coffee cup down and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't usually talk about this with anyone," he admitted, his voice low and heavy with frustration. "But I'm just trying to keep my business afloat. Things have been going downhill for a while. Bills are piling up and I can't seem to turn things around no matter how hard I try. I've tried everything, loans, investments, you name it, but nothing's working. I'm at my wit's end." Maria took a step closer, not out of pity but because she could feel the weight of his words. She had been in his shoes, standing on the edge, wondering if there was any way out. She had learned one thing through it all. Sometimes the answer wasn't in the hustle, the loans, or the investments. It was in the small, simple things, the kind of help that didn't come with strings attached. "I understand," Maria said softly, sitting down across from him without waiting for an invitation. "I know what it's like to feel like you're stuck. Like no matter how hard you try, nothing ever changes. But I want to offer you something." The man looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Maria smiled, her eyes warm and sincere. "I want to buy you lunch today. No strings attached. I know it's not much, but sometimes just the smallest act of kindness can remind us that there's still good in the world. You don't have to solve everything today. But maybe just for this moment we can both take a breath and start fresh." The businessman's mouth parted, but no words came out at first. He seemed taken aback by her offer. Maria could see him wrestling with his pride. He didn't want charity, didn't want to feel weak. But her offer wasn't about charity, it was about sharing the burden, if only for a moment. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable than before. "I want to," Maria replied. "It's not about pity. It's about showing up for each other. We all need someone to show up for us at some point." For a long moment he didn't say anything, but the tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. His face softened, and he gave a small nod, as if he had been carrying the weight of something far too heavy for too long. Finally he smiled, though it was hesitant at first. "All right," he said, his voice quieter now. "Thank you." Maria's heart warmed as she stood up and walked to the counter to pay for the meal. She hadn't expected anything in return, but there was something in his expression now, a shift, a small flicker of hope that hadn't been there before. It was enough to remind her that kindness, even in its simplest form, had the power to change the course of a moment, to change the course of a life. When she returned to the table, she set the check down in front of him with a soft smile. "I hope this helps," Maria said, feeling a sense of fulfillment she couldn't quite explain. "And just remember, sometimes things get worse before they get better. But it doesn't mean you're out of options." The businessman nodded slowly, his eyes locked on hers with a new understanding. "I don't know how to thank you for this," he said, his voice full of gratitude. "It's more than just lunch. It's something else." Maria shrugged, not looking for thanks but appreciating the sincerity in his words. "Sometimes you just need someone to believe in you again. That's all." She walked out of the diner, feeling lighter than she had in days. The rain had stopped and the world felt a little brighter. She didn't expect anything to come from this simple act. No grand gestures, no sudden windfalls. But she knew she had done something meaningful, something that could have a ripple effect far beyond the walls of that small diner. A week passed before Maria thought about the businessman again. She didn't expect to see him. It wasn't about that. But as she walked into the same diner, hoping for a quiet meal, her eyes fell on a familiar figure sitting at the counter. There he was, the businessman, but this time he looked different. There was a noticeable shift in his posture. He wasn't hunched over anymore, staring blankly into space. Instead, he sat upright, his eyes bright, scanning over a set of papers with a focused determination. Maria couldn't help but smile as she walked over to him. As soon as he saw her, his face lit up with a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Maria," he said, standing up quickly, his voice full of energy. "I didn't expect to see you again. I wanted to thank you properly." She raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" He waved his hand as if he couldn't contain the news any longer. "You won't believe it, but things are turning around. That small act of kindness you showed me changed everything. I've secured a new investor, someone who believes in what I'm doing. I didn't know what I was doing before, but now, I feel like I've got a chance." Maria's smile deepened, her heart swelling with pride for him. "That's amazing," she said, truly happy for him. "I'm glad things are looking up." He nodded eagerly. "I want to repay you somehow. I know it's not much, but I've been saving up for something that could really help me get my business off the ground. I'd like to offer you something in return." Maria shook her head, not needing anything. But she could see that he wanted to give something back, and that was enough. "It's not about the money or the repayment," she said. "It's about the fact that you kept going. You found a way to push through, and that's the most important thing." He smiled, and for the first time Maria could see the hope in his eyes. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. And as she left the diner that day, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had set in motion something bigger than herself, a simple act that had changed the course of both their lives. And maybe, just maybe, that was all anyone could really ask for. Weeks passed before Maria returned to the diner again. She hadn't expected to see the businessman. Her small act of kindness had been a fleeting moment, an exchange between two strangers who briefly crossed paths during a difficult time. She hadn't anticipated any changes or consequences, but the memory of his grateful expression stayed with her, a quiet reminder that sometimes the simplest actions have the most profound impact. When she walked in that morning, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon greeted her. The diner was busy, more so than usual, but her eyes were immediately drawn to the corner booth where the businessman had sat. The seat was occupied now, but not by him. Maria's heart sank for a moment, unsure of what to expect, but she tried not to let it show. She ordered her usual coffee and a quick breakfast, before finding a spot at the counter. It wasn't long before a voice called out to her from behind. Maria. She turned to find the businessman standing there, a broad smile spreading across his face, his eyes brighter than she remembered. His appearance had changed too. He no longer looked worn down by sleepless nights or the weight of a failing business. Instead, he stood with a new confidence, his clothes more polished, his posture straighter. It was as if he had shed the heaviness of the past few weeks. "Are you following me now?" Maria joked with a playful grin as he approached. He laughed, the sound light and genuine. No. I'm not stalking you, I promise. I just wanted to thank you again for everything you did." Maria raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I told you before, you don't need to thank me." But he shook his head. "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice sincere. "You didn't just buy me a meal that day. You didn't just give me money or charity. You gave me something bigger. You gave me hope when I didn't know where to find it." Maria sat back in her chair, feeling her heart soften. She had no idea what kind of ripple her small gesture might have created, but hearing him speak like this, hearing the change in his voice, made her realize the depth of what she had done. "Is that so?" she asked, her tone gentle, still surprised by the weight his words carried. "It is," he said, sitting down next to her without waiting for an invitation. "After you left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't know what I was doing wrong, but you showed me that sometimes all it takes is a moment to shift everything. I made a decision to get serious about turning things around. And Maria, I'm happy to tell you that I've signed a partnership agreement with an investor who believes in my business." Maria's jaw dropped. She hadn't expected anything like this. Her small gesture, which had only been motivated by a desire to help, had set a chain of events into motion that was now paying off in ways she could never have imagined. "Wait, you're telling me you got an investor?" she asked, incredulity lacing her voice. "That's incredible. How did that happen?" The businessman's face lit up with pride. "I started working on my pitch again, reorganizing the vision for the business, and approaching people with a new mindset. I realized I had been so focused on the obstacles that I'd forgotten to see the opportunities. The investor saw something in me. He saw potential, not just in the business but in my ability to keep pushing through, even when things seemed impossible." Maria smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's amazing," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I'm so glad it worked out for you. But that's not all," the businessman continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. "You helped me see things in a way that I wasn't able to before. Your kindness, your belief in me, hasn't just helped my business, it's helped me grow as a person. And I want to thank you for that. I want to give back to you in some way, Maria." She shook her head, looking at him with surprise. "I don't need anything in return," she said softly. "I really don't." But he smiled again, a deep and genuine smile that seemed to come from somewhere profound. "I know you don't, but I want to show you that your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed. That's why I've been thinking of something. I want to offer you a partnership, in a way. I can't promise a financial windfall, but I want to offer you something that will benefit you in ways I can't explain yet. You've helped me more than you know, and now I want to help you." Maria blinked, feeling her heart race. She wasn't sure what he meant by a partnership, but the sincerity in his eyes made her believe that whatever it was genuine. Her first instinct was to refuse, to say she didn't need anything, but as she looked at him, something told her that this offer wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about a shared understanding of what it meant to rise above adversity, to believe in each other when the world had seemed ready to give up. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "You've already done more than enough." The businessman nodded, his gaze steady. "I am. You've taught me something invaluable, Maria. And now I want to return the favor. I don't expect anything from you in return. But if you're willing, I'd like to take you up on the idea of a partnership." Maria sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his offer sinking in. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she couldn't deny that she felt something stir inside her. A possibility, a spark of something that could change everything. She thought about the struggles she had faced, the times she had doubted herself, and the moments when someone had shown up to offer a hand, just like she had for him. Finally, Maria smiled. "All right," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'm in." The businessman reached across the table, extending his hand. Maria shook it, feeling the unspoken promise between them. This was just the beginning, she knew. The simple act of buying a meal for a stranger had turned into something much bigger. A chance for both of them to move forward, to help each other, and to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. As she left the diner later that day, she couldn't help but feel like everything had changed. Her act of kindness, though small, had ignited a chain reaction that would shape the future of both their lives. For the first time in a long time, Maria believed that even the smallest of gestures had the power to transform everything. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something truly extraordinary. The following weeks unfolded with a sense of urgency and excitement that neither Maria nor the businessman, whose name it turned out was David, had expected. Maria had agreed to work with him not out of expectation of something big, but because, somewhere deep down, she felt like their connection was more than just a chance encounter. She wanted to help David because, despite his failures, he wasn't giving up. And that spirit resonated deeply with her. David had immediately jumped into action after their agreement. He reshaped his business plan, leaning into the vision that Maria had subtly helped him rediscover, a vision not just of survival but of flourishing. They started meeting regularly, sitting together in quiet, cluttered corners of his office, discussing strategy, brainstorming marketing ideas, and slowly, steadily building a foundation for his business that had been missing before. Maria wasn't just helping with the ideas, she was helping him rebuild his self-belief. It was something small yet profoundly significant. Every time David came to a crossroads, facing another decision about whether to take a financial risk or lean into a new venture, he turned to Maria. She didn't always have all the answers, but she was there, listening, advising, and reminding him that failure wasn't a reflection of who he was, but a part of the process. Then one day, about a month after their first meeting in the diner, David called Maria early in the morning. His voice was full of excitement. "Maria, you won't believe this," he said, his words tumbling out. "I've got an investor, an angel who believes in this business. I've got the funds for the expansion. This is it, this is the turning point. And I want you to be part of this, not just as a partner but as someone who helped me get here." Maria's heart skipped a beat, but she remained calm. "That's amazing, David. I'm so proud of you." David paused, his tone more serious now. "No, Maria. You don't get it. This isn't just about the business. It's about everything we've been talking about. It's about the faith we have in what we're doing. And I want you to see it too. This partnership, the investment, everything, it's all yours too. This is our success." Maria felt a lump in her throat as she processed his words. He was offering her a stake in his success, not out of obligation but because he recognized that she had been an integral part of getting him back on his feet. She had been the one who, in his darkest hour, had extended a hand, and now her act of kindness had led to this moment, a moment where they both could grow together. "David," Maria said softly, her voice shaky with emotion. "I don't know what to say. I'm so honored, but you've worked so hard for this. I'm just happy I could be there for you." He chuckled, the sound warm and reassuring. "You're more than just there for me, Maria. You changed everything. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And now it's paying off." They both sat in silence for a moment, letting the magnitude of what had just been said sink in. It wasn't long after that call that things began to pick up. The changes David made to his business, with Maria's guidance, started to show results. Clients began to take notice of the renewed energy in his work, and his reputation began to spread. He secured more contracts, attracted new investors, and slowly but surely, his business began to grow in ways he hadn't imagined just a few short months ago. For Maria, it wasn't about the money or the partnership. It was about seeing someone stand back up after everything had fallen apart. She had been in those shoes, struggling to find her way after difficult losses, and now she could see that it was possible to rebuild, not just businesses but lives. David had come to represent a new chapter in her own life as well. Watching him find his feet again gave her a renewed sense of purpose, one that fueled her own ambitions and aspirations. A few months after their initial meeting, David invited Maria to a celebratory dinner. It wasn't just to mark the successful investment deal, but to recognize her contribution, her unwavering belief in him when no one else did. The evening was elegant but simple. The restaurant was intimate, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. As they sat across from each other, the soft glow of the candles flickering in the background, David raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice steady and full of appreciation. "To partnerships, business and personal. And to you, Maria. Without you, none of this would have been possible. You didn't just give me a meal, you gave me my life back." Maria blinked back tears, her heart full. "David, you did this. I was just there to help guide you when you needed it most. But you're the one who pushed through." David smiled, his eyes soft. "Maybe. But your kindness, it changed everything." As they clinked glasses, Maria realized that it wasn't just about the business or the success. It was about the connection they had shared, a small act of kindness that had led to something far more profound than either of them could have expected. The simple meal she had bought for a struggling businessman had turned into a partnership, a new life, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to give and receive. The rain that had once been a backdrop to their first meeting now felt like a distant memory, washed away by the sun of new opportunities. And as they sat there, toasting to their successes, Maria couldn't help but feel grateful. Sometimes all it took was one simple gesture, one moment of compassion, to change not just one life but two. For both of them the future was wide open. And they were ready to face it together.